So as we're talking about this, Travis, what do you think the meaning is to your native culture to expand out and reach out and have these alliances and partnerships with, let's say, the Vatican or even with other countries?
I've thought about that, and I think it's in exchange of first of our culture. I think we have an opportunity to share our culture from our perspective, not the history book's perspective, or not, like we spoke about earlier, Hollywood's perspective, or this romantic view, but from us, actually, the modern.
So it gives you an opportunity to have a voice and to really drive the narrative a bit from your perspective.
Yeah, and what that means today in this new paradigm, and really I think it's from me probably becoming 50 years old now and kind of looking at it from this next half a century for me. I think I spent the first 50 years of my life really in a lot of ways being colonized. The American dream, that's sold to us.
Sold to all of us.
Right? Yeah, to all of us, really. From media, back then it was the TV news, nightly news, magazines, movies, things like that. And then into our educational systems. And I feel like this next 50 years of my life, I want to decolonize. And what that means to me is really my daily living, spending my mornings in prayers and meditation. And honestly, I've gotten some of that from Eastern religions as well, as far as like Zen Buddhism and things like that. That's been appealing to me, and those philosophies. I think that's more my intellectual part, but I think it's kind of influenced my Dakota part as well. And getting to that, it's reconnecting with those roots as well. And I think in a lot of ways it's built into my DNA. Those you get bits and pieces growing up on the reservation and being in a Native American family. From my grandparents on what they saw and the language they spoke. And then I think what the real big change is for me coming back home is to see how many youth and how the educational system has changed and how many people I see getting back into our culture. It was kind of hidden, I think, for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually outlawed until the 70s. We couldn't practice our religion or spirituality. And so I think it's kind of taken, that's almost 50 years now since it was legalized for us to have it come out more in the open and actually being practiced in the open. So for me, it's getting back to those Dakota spirituality life ways, from the way we eat. Try to eat as much like that as possible. I try to. Not all the time.
We could discuss an hour just about how the native diet has changed.
Oh yeah.
Over the last couple of centuries, for the worse, really.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is you'd like to find ways to get back to this.
Yeah, and I try to. There's primarily try to stick to like a protein type of diet, is more whole or organic. I mean, we have a buffalo herd back home. We could basically get meat. There's friends of mine that I grew up that hunt pretty much year round or fish year round. So incorporating those protein sources, and then other things, like the wild rice, that plays a role, or maybe squashes or sweet potatoes, things like that into that.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I think sugar is the culprit probably more than anything nowadays for the native diet. For instance, if we could go on and on about the native diet, I've never been really able to handle any sort of dairy product, and my family hasn't. I could tolerate it, but I just don't eat it all the time. I don't think you would really catch a native drinking a cup of milk. You might, but they'd probably be sick after that.
Sure.
But getting back to those ways and living that sort of life, getting back to our ceremonial ways, getting back to our language ways, getting back to our food, those life ways, I think we could share that with other communities. Because at the end of the day, I think it's tribal, and I think we're all tribal at some point. No matter where you came from in the world, I think there's tribal roots there.
Sure. So this is something I've been able to experience when we did an agriculture project in East Africa, and there was tribal culture there as well, and we had a Native American representative come over there from the Minwakan Sioux for that project, and I know that there was really a strong connection between the two tribal cultures,
Right.
and what they felt they could share with each other with that.
Right.
So in your experience, having gone to Europe this year and traveling around both in Italy and I know also you were in France, what was the perception of a Native American when you got there?
It was honestly everybody I ran across that I spoke to knew I was a Native American in Europe. I mean, they were like,
Interesting.
"Excuse me, sir, no offense or anything, but are you a Native American?" I was like, yeah, I am."
I'll be.
And
How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel like Americans need to learn more about us, because I think we're probably more foreign to Americans than we are to Europeans, is what I felt. One intriguing question, when we were in Florence, I went out to dinner that night by myself, and I always heard about the Tuscan red meat, the steak and stuff. So that's what I went looking for, and I enjoyed the meal. And the whole kitchen staff came out and talked to me, and they said, "Sir, you're a Native American, right? You don't?" I was like, "Yes." So they all came out to come look at me or something, even the chef.
Did they want to touch you or anything?
Yeah, exactly. So, and one of the guys that came and talked to me, and he was like, "Sir, please don't get offended, but you guys are sovereign too, just like a country, right? But inside the U.S." And I said, "You know what? I wish more Americans, our neighbors,
Would
knew
understand that too.
Yeah, knew that. But you guys know it over here, but I wish more of our neighbors over here would know that."
That is amazing that they would have that idea already.
Yeah, and I don't know why people. I think they know about the casinos too, and I think maybe it was the Seminoles and Hard Rock have something to do with that, because I know they have properties over there as well.
Right, the Hard Rock brand is prolific throughout parts of Europe and the major cities.
I think that had something to do with it too. They might knowing about that. Then of course, going to France after that week or so in Italy, it's always been a dream of mine to go to France, because my last name is Renville, and we descend from French fur traders that came across from Ontario, across the Great Lakes, and then here into Minnesota. We could actually trace our ancestry back to a village in downtown St. Paul called Kaposia.
Wow.
And that's where the Renville fur traders met the Metawakanton ancestor of my family, and her name was actually Minnie Yuhe, woman who carries water. So I've always been intrigued about France and their whole culture, and of course their cuisine as well too. And going from Italy to France, again, was always a dream of mine. Also because of the Renaissance, I've of course wanted to see the art, the Louvre. Again, I always wanted to hear about French culture. And then, so spending a few days there, and at first I was a little bit lost, and I think it was more because of the language. I think I could relate to more of the Latin languages and the Spanish languages than I could the French language. I think it's the vowels and all that stuff. And,
Sure.
and I was actually kind of got a little bit scared because I came out of the subway system being underground for an hour from the airport to downtown Paris, and coming up I just lost my orientation and I didn't know who to talk to, but thankfully a lot of folks know English over there, got me pointed in the right direction, and I had a good night's rest, got up early, went to the Louvre. I saw the things I wanted to see. I think I could probably spend a week straight at the Louvre going through every little detail that I wanted to.
Well, and one should note that's not the only fine art museum in Paris.
Yeah, exactly. And I suggest to anybody going over there, what I found is just get on one of those buses and go around the city. I would do that for a couple days just to get orientated and then figure out, get off and see what you want to see. Saw, wow, that's probably about 5 or 10 other museums I'd like to go to. We'll save that for another trip. What was most intriguing to me to Paris was a couple different things. I found out they have a ministry in Paris that helps all French descendants.
No?
So trace their lineage and where they come from. So from that perspective, I'd like to learn more about that and probably go visit them and find out where the Renvilles came from. There's things that we know in our family, like there's a coat of arms that we know. Our previous
That came from Europe.
yeah, came from Atlantis. Our original last name was D. Renville, and then as generations.
It's interesting, and having traveled to France a lot, it seems to me when you said that I've seen this de Renville in other aspects, and I've never made the association as long as I've known you about that.
Yeah. So I noticed that a few different places too, and talking to the French people I came across there. I mentioned on my last name and all the various last names at my tribe now. La Fontaine, Rouillard, LeBlanc, Dumars, Dumarius, La Framboise. They were telling me some of the history of where those people come from in different parts of France. So I thought that was pretty cool to hear that stuff too. But in our family, we do have a picture of our French coat of arms. It's 3 acorns. Which I think is pretty cool. I think I'd like to take that coat of arms and probably indigenize it a little bit, put some eagle feathers on there, maybe some other designs or something, and make it more modern.
It's interesting when as I'm stepping back a few minutes in our conversation, but it's interesting when you talk about, this tribal environment that you're seeing. It's interesting. You could probably draw almost some sort of a parallel between these family names that you saw there, or if you were to go into Scotland, and look at clans and things like that. It's almost it's a variation of a tribal existence and stuff. So there's actually some interesting European parallels to tribal environments.
Yeah. And again, if you look at the history of Europe, it was tribal, and there was tribal wars, between the Roman Empire and the Huns and the Gauls and the Franks and Anglos and Saxons. I think there was a lot of that going around, and I guess coming over here, running against tribal people, I've heard many times they called us noble savages. So I guess even though we were savage, it's kind of two opposites. On one hand, we were noble. On the other hand, over here we're savages. I've heard that, and I've saw that in a few history books. And where does that leave us today? I guess I don't know. I don't know if we're nobility or at all. I'd probably say we're even more savage nowadays.
But in the Constitution or in the Declaration of Independence, how are natives referred to?
Yes, Mark. We had a good. Every time the 4th of July rolls around, I always send Mark. I remind him that, hey, we're our treaties, and we are solidified in the Declaration. Our founding American U.S. documents, they called us merciless Indian savages. So,
Are there any books named that right now? If not, you should reserve that title.
I don't think there is, but that's a good idea. If anything, there should be a T-shirt or called the podcast, The Merciless Indian Savages.
Great name for the podcast, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so, going back to Paris again, talk about savagery there. We went to some of the parks where, Louis XIV and Marie Antoinette
lost their heads.
The guillotine was considered a proper and moral way to execute someone.
Almost an elegant way of execution.
Yeah, a poetic way. When we look at it now, it's, wow, it was pure savagery there, too.
Sure.
I think, one of my grandmother, she was one of the first Native American nurses in the country, and she had a big influence on me academically and I think intellectually, and she's one of the ones that, we would always have the Star Tribune, and she would make me read it, start with the comics or start with the trivia or the things like that, and then, just as curiosity, you would look at the whole thing, right, and start noticing what was going on in the world. And she would make me watch the nightly news and stuff to understand current events, and she said a lot of these wars that go on even today, she thought it was because of hunger, and people wanting resources and things like that. And they say that too. We're just 48 hours or a few days away from anarchy, really, if we ran out of food and
or especially water.
Yeah.
It's a very under valued resource to us, maybe up in the northern states of the United States here, that because we have a lot of it. But once you start getting to a desert region or something like that, you realize that water is worth more than anything.
Yeah. And so in those travels too, they call it the Latin Quarter. It's actually really close to Notre Dame, and a lot of nightlife there, just a lot of tourism. The Latin Quarter is where one of my favorite authors came out of, Victor Hugo. He wrote Les Miserables, probably one of my favorite plays and books. And then, of course, he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Sure.
And you could see where he got his inspiration in the Latin Quarter, looking across the street at Notre Dame, right?
Sure.
So that Latin Quarter is known as an intellectual type of area. And, again, if you spoke Latin over the last hundreds of years, you were considered an intellectual. It's an intellectual language. And so Voltaire wrote in those areas in the Latin Quarter.
It's like reading a history book as you walk around there.
Yeah. And so I felt that inspiration walking around there in the coffee shops, the croissants and what are those things called? The crepes and different things like that. You could feel the inspiration there. There's still the booksellers there to this day along the Rhine there. They were still there. They've been there for hundreds of years, I suppose, since the book Gutenberg invented
the press.
And they've been there since then. But that night, kind of wandering around the Latin Quarter, stopped to have a cigar, and there was jazz clubs there, and there was other things there. But one club that just happened to have seating there, sat by a couple of young gentlemen. They were probably in their late 20s, early 30s. They were working on their master's degrees and dissertations and things like that, and just had a intellectual kind of conversation with those guys, and end up connecting with one of them, and I'm helping him write parts of his dissertation right now. I referred him to some Native authors, and because he was kind of writing like a psychology or more like a social science type of dissertation, I think, for his PhD. And so I pointed him to some of the modern Native American writers or Dakota or Lakota writers. And we kept in touch since then. They're telling me they want to come over here at some point. We'll see, but
Well, you should embrace that. You know,
Yeah.
this is your own way of expanding the culture and creating friends and.
yeah. Uh,
So you know what's interesting to me is just how after this expanding your mind a bit and traveling to Europe and thinking about these different aspects. I know you came back very motivated to do and try some new things. Subsequently, you were elected to a position within your own tribe, and that's now giving you a platform to do some things. And what are some inspirations that you're working on right now within your own tribe?
Sure. So, again, I'm the chairman of one of our 7 political subdivisions of our tribe. We have about 1,500 tribal members in my district. I came into the situation, it was a landslide, I tell people, and I thank people for their vote, but nobody ran against me.
So I hope you won by a large margin.
Yeah. Nobody wanted the job is what it came down to.
Isn't that true in more and more of politics? Is that
Yeah.
nobody really wants the job?
Nobody really wants the job. I took the position because I think I could contribute. Actually, I know I can contribute. It's just, it's really kind of an assessment phase right now for me because I've been gone for so long, and it's getting back to the grassroots people, understanding. So a lot of the guys my age are still around. We're elders now, but there's still an elder group ahead of us yet. So it's really cool to reconnect with them and see how the changes and how our language has been intertwined. And then I see a whole bunch of youth that are coming up, as the future. So how do we kind of integrate it? So I created a platform coming in, and a lot of it was revolving around revitalizing our culture again. What do we do for the elders, the youth? The standard kind of political platforms. It came down to me. It really was fixing some of the issues that we have now. Perhaps bringing a network, even your network and my network, to the table to see how we could solve some pretty critical things that are going on right now in our district, but also creating a platform. And here's one thing that keeps getting brought up to me. Travis, you're running our government like a business. I didn't know.
And are they saying that as though there's something wrong with that? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of like a knock that I'm running it like a business, but I think something has to be done. It has to run some kind of way. It hasn't been running like a government. It hasn't been running like a business. So I think I'm trying to run it, I guess, probably more from a business perspective, because that's really my education. What I've been doing.
And you were elected to bring your perspective to the job.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are kind of they know who my family is for sure. They know who my father is. They know my brother, and I don't think they know who I am anymore because I've changed myself.
And you were away for some time.
Yeah, I was away for a long time.
Which gives you those skills and education and ideas to bring back into the mix.
Yeah. I think the most important thing, though, Mark, honestly, this time around is I'm sober. I'll be sober 2 years this month. That has brought a whole new spiritual and a professional perspective to me. I would just be clear-minded, and putting that off to the side and showing up really on a day-to-day basis as strong as I can be. And I feel like the strongest I've ever been in my life, really, mentally, physically, spiritually.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I share that with people. Things still happen. There's ups and downs, but you take them sober-minded, and you deal with them, which you're supposed to do anyway. So I think I bring a different perspective to the district. we take since gaming has been around at our tribe, it's been a top-down approach. The gaming has been brought to the tribal government. Tribal government then puts it down to the districts, and then the districts put it into the tribal membership. Well, with what's going on in the economy nowadays and all the technological changes, the political changes, I'm trying to bring more, instead of a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach. What can we do here at the district level that can make a difference for our district and our district membership?
Mm-hmm.
Housing, working on housing initiatives, which has
Mm-hmm.
never been done at the district level.
I visited recently up there, and I see that you guys have some pretty big plans for housing.
Yeah, so that's the tribal housing part of it, and I feel they're doing a pretty good job, but I still feel like more can be done. And I've talked to them, and we agreed that the district should be picking up their share too, because they can't do all the work, either.
The housing can't do all the
Yeah,
work.
the housing can't do all the work, so.
Plus, as the district, you probably have a different purview and perspective to some of your constituents' needs and,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Location needs and things, and so from the top-down approach, what can we do around housing? Creating those types of capacity, writing our own grants. Hasn't really been done. Usually the tribe handles that, or the tribal programs.
But you're saying you can embrace that within your own district.
Yeah, we're considered like a mini tribe inside our tribe. So we have the right to go.
So you have standing.
Yeah, we have standing. And how I've been telling it to tribal leadership and to folks like the housing is that with everything that's going on politically and policy-wise, don't you think it's better that we have 2 horses or 3 horses or 8 horses in a race instead of 1?
Mm-hmm.
And we all tend to agree. And we agree that we should be doing those types of things. Because the tribe doesn't see all the grants either. I think there's a handful of grants that I've come across that the tribe's not even aware of, or another district. So taking that perspective from a grant writing perspective has been a change. And then, of course, economic development. Economic development, to me, revolves around there's the money part of it, but what service can we provide? And with my perspective and my credentials and career revolved around healthcare related activities. And that's a different perspective for tribes, not only for us, but I think for all tribes, is because we haven't looked at the healthcare sector as a business opportunity. It's usually been the federal government that has provided through the Indian Health Service, or perhaps if you're a veteran, the Veterans Administration, or if you're incarcerated, the Bureau of Prisons. That's how we've gotten healthcare.
But the time is now. You now have the education, the technology, and some of the resources to actually pursue some of that on your own.
Yeah, and so I look at it from a perspective, at the bottom line, it's a business and a revenue generator, but we're providing a much needed service, especially mental and behavioral health. From our earlier session, I trace a lot of our issues that we have around trauma and mental health and things like that, and addiction, things like that. And so looking at healthcare as a business opportunity, but it's twofold. We're addressing a need too, as far as healthcare and wellness and all those types of things.